In this lesson, we will write the scene management code, which will be required for starting a new game from the main menu. To begin, we are going to import the addressables package. And we're going to make use of a class that I got from this forum post. Essentially what it does is it enforces the asset reference to be of type scene because we can't use the generics equivalent of asset reference with scenes at the moment. And so we're going to create a new class called scene reference. And we're just going to paste the code. In Unity, we're going to create a new scene, and we're going to call it entry point. And then we're going to remove the game objects in the scene, and we're going to create a new empty one called entry point. Then we're going to create a mono behavior called entry point, and we are going to create a variable to store a scene reference for our manager scene, as well as our main menu scene. So in the start function, we're going to make it an enumerator because we will be waiting for the asynchronous functions to finish. And so we're going to call load scene async on our manager scene reference. Now we're going to add our entry point script to our game object, and then we're going to create a new scene for our managers. We're going to open it up, and we're going to remove all of the game objects within it. Then in our entry point script, we're going to drag the reference. Now if I hit play, we should see that it loads our manager scene. Now we're going to create a new scriptable object called load scene channel. And then it's going to have a event called load. And it's important that you set it to event here because we don't want anything to be able to override the value such that it removes any listeners. And then we're going to create a public function called load that invokes that action. Then we're going to create a variable to store a reference to our channel we just created. And the reason why we are using an asset reference here as opposed to referencing the scriptable object directly is because when you have multiple scenes, it will create a duplicate, and then the mono behavior is listening for the event won't actually receive them. And so we're going to load our scriptable object, and then we're going to call load passing in the main scene. And then we are going to use the scene manager singleton to unload the scene at the index 0, which will be our entry point. Now we're going to create a new Unity script called scene loader. Then we're going to create a variable to store our load scene channel. And here you can use an asset reference, but so long as the other one is using one, we can get away with it. And so in our onEnable and onDisable functions, we're going to listen for the load event. And when it's called, we are going to load our scene. So first, we're going to create a variable called the scene to load. And we're going to set that to the scene reference that was passed in. Then we're going to create another variable to store the current scene reference. And essentially we're going to check whether it's null. And if it's not, then we're going to unload the current scene. And let's just call it scene reference to make it explicit. Now we're going to call load scene async on our scene reference. And we're going to make sure we set the mode to additive. And then we're going to store that in a variable called handle. And then we're going to listen for the completed event. And then we're going to call onSceneLoaded. We'll rename the variable to handle. And then we're going to get the scene from the handle. Then we are going to make it our active scene using the scene manager singleton. And the reason why we want to do that is if we instantiate any objects, they will be created in that scene. Now we're going to create a new folder called scriptable objects. And then within there, we're going to create a folder called channels, and we're going to create an instance of our load seed channel. Then we're going to drag that into our entry point mono behavior. And I'm going to create a new scene for our main menu. And then we're going to make it addressable and drag it into the inspector. Now, if we open up our manager scene, we're going to create a new empty game object called scene loader. And then we are going to get a reference to our channel. In our main menu scene, we're going to create a new empty game object called main menu UI, and then we're going to add our main menu UI script. We're going to set our panel and the main menu UXML. we're going to navigate back to our entry point screen, and now we don't need the sample scene anymore, so we can go ahead and delete that. Now if I press play, you can see that it loaded our manager's scene as well as the main menu scene.